It started with a silence that no one expected. The cameras were rolling, the audience was buzzing, and yet, for a split second, the room froze. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, walked across the stage of ABC's The View with that trademark poise. Head high, shoulders back, the subtle smirk that had once charmed half the world. But as she approached the panel, one woman leaned forward, microphone in hand, and shattered the tension with 7 cutting words. "Meghan, maybe it's time to step down." That woman was Whoopi Goldberg. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The audience gasped. The producers backstage scrambled. What was supposed to be Meghan's triumphant television debut, a fresh start after years of royal controversy, had turned into a moment of national shock. But before we unpack the chaos that unfolded that morning, we have to ask, how did Meghan Markle even end up here, trying to share a stage with Whoopi Goldberg, one of the most powerful voices in daytime television? Because this wasn't just another talk show appearance. This was a battle for control, for reputation, relevance, and redemption. And it began months before Meghan ever stepped foot on that studio floor. It all started with whispers that Meghan was looking for a new platform. After the collapse of her Spotify deal and Netflix's quiet disinterest in her latest proposals, insiders said she had her eye on something more personal, something live, something that puts her back in control of the narrative. And when word leaked that she'd been in talks with ABC executives about joining The View as a guest co-host, the reaction was instant. Half of Hollywood rolled their eyes. The other half leaned forward, waiting for the explosion. Imagine it. Meghan Markle, the woman who walked away from the British royal family claiming she wanted privacy, now stepping into one of America's loudest, most opinionated talk show tables. A stage built on fiery debates, clashing personalities, and unfiltered truths. It sounded like a PR nightmare waiting to happen, or the biggest comeback television had ever seen. But no one predicted how fast it would unravel. When ABC executives first reached out to Meghan's team, they saw potential. The View had been craving younger audiences, and Meghan brought name recognition, international intrigue, and social media clout. But behind closed doors, Whoopi Goldberg wasn't impressed. According to insiders close to production, Whoopi questioned Meghan's motives from the start. She reportedly asked, "Does she want to host a show or own the room?" It wasn't cynicism. It was intuition. Whoopi had been in the industry long enough to smell when someone wasn't there for the conversation, but for the spotlight. And she was right to be cautious. Because as the weeks went by, Meghan's requests grew complicated. She wanted creative control over her segments. She asked for approval on topics before live broadcast. And, most controversially, she reportedly requested that the show avoid certain trigger subjects, namely, her relationship with the royal family and her ongoing reputation struggles. In other words, she wanted to join The View, but not be viewed too closely. The producers were torn. On one hand, Meghan was a guaranteed ratings spike. On the other, Whoopi and her co-hosts had built their show on one sacred principle: authenticity. You could be wrong, loud, or controversial, but you had to be real. And Meghan's terms felt anything but. Still, ABC gave the green light. One special guest segment. One live appearance. Just enough to test the waters. But on the morning of that episode, something was already off. Backstage, witnesses said Meghan arrived flanked by 2 personal aides and a stylist, not uncommon for a celebrity guest, but unusual for a show that prided itself on casual, unscripted energy. She avoided the green room chatter, declined hair and makeup assistance from the network team, and reportedly told one producer she didn't want surprises. To anyone else, that might sound reasonable. But to Whoopi Goldberg, it was a red flag waving in high definition. The moment Meghan walked on stage, you could feel the atmosphere shift. The audience clapped, yes, but there was a strange tension in the air, that cautious applause people give when they're not sure whether to cheer or cringe. Meghan smiled, waved, and took her seat beside Whoopi, who, for the record, didn't smile back. The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Light banter, polite laughter, rehearsed lines. But when the conversation turned to modern women in media, the gloves quietly came off. One of the co-hosts, Sunny Hostin, asked Meghan about her transition from acting to advocacy. Meghan answered as she often did, polished, calculated, and slightly defensive. But then she began steering the conversation toward her personal brand. She mentioned her unfair treatment by the media, the pressure of public life, and how many women in power were misunderstood. It was classic Meghan, turning a topic of discussion into a mirror reflecting herself. That's when Whoopi leaned in. In a tone that was calm but edged with unmistakable authority, Whoopi asked, "But Meghan, don't you think that stepping into every spotlight that opens might be part of the problem? Sometimes power is knowing when to step back, not step up." The studio fell silent. Meghan blinked. The producers, according to one witness, nearly fainted. And the audience? Well, the audience went wild. It was raw. It was real. And it was humiliating. But that wasn't the end of it. Because Meghan, visibly flustered, tried to laugh it off. She said, "I think women can be powerful and present at the same time." Whoopi nodded slowly, then delivered the line that would trend for days. "Then maybe it's time to step down before trying to climb over people who've already done the work." Boom. Instant shockwave. The clip hit social media within minutes. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, the moment spread like wildfire. Some viewers called it the reality check Meghan needed. Others accused Whoopi of bullying. But one thing everyone agreed on. Meghan had walked into The View expecting admiration and walked out with a verbal knockout. Now, here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because what happened on camera was only half the story. Off camera, tensions boiled over. Meghan reportedly stormed off the set moments after the commercial break, refusing to take photos or greet audience members. Whoopi, according to multiple eyewitnesses, simply shook her head and said, "She's not ready for this table." That line, that quiet remark, would become symbolic of the whole debacle. But why did Whoopi say it? What had she seen or felt that convinced her Meghan didn't belong there? Was it jealousy, as some tabloids claimed? Or was it something deeper, an instinct honed from decades in the entertainment industry that told her when someone's ambition outpaced their authenticity? That's the question we'll unravel tonight. Because behind Whoopi's confrontation lay years of buried tension. Between old Hollywood and new celebrity culture, between earned respect and curated fame, Whoopi Goldberg had clawed her way to the top through raw talent, grit, and unapologetic honesty. Meghan Markle, in Whoopi's eyes, seemed to be trying to shortcut her way there through narrative control and public image management. The two women represented two completely different worlds colliding live on air. But this wasn't just about personalities. It was about legacy. Whoopi Goldberg, the EGOT winner, has always been fiercely protective of The View's integrity. It's her home turf, her kingdom. And when Meghan entered that arena, trying to reshape its dynamics, she threatened that balance. So, when Whoopi told her to step down, it wasn't just a jab. It was a defense of something bigger. And the aftermath? It was brutal. ABC's inbox flooded with mixed reactions. Fans demanded Meghan be barred from ever returning. Meghan's team scrambled to spin the event as a misunderstanding, releasing carefully worded statements about miscommunication and creative passion. But it was too late. The public had already made up its mind. The woman who once claimed she was silenced by the palace had just been silenced on live television by one of Hollywood's most respected women. Still, the question lingered. Was this humiliation the end of Meghan's media dreams or the beginning of another reinvention? Because if there's one thing Meghan Markle has mastered, it's turning a scandal into a storyline. And that's exactly what she tried to do next. In the days following the View debacle, Meghan's camp began quietly contacting journalists, pushing a new narrative, that she had been ambushed, that the segment was edited unfairly, that Whoopi had crossed a line. But the raw footage told a different story. There were no cuts, no edits, just one moment of unscripted honesty that the world wasn't ready to forget. Meanwhile, Whoopi refused to back down. During the following episode, when asked about the controversy, she simply said, "The View isn't a PR platform. It's a conversation. And if you can't handle being challenged, you're in the wrong chair." That single comment, calm, grounded, devastatingly precise, buried Meghan's media ambitions deeper than any tabloid headline ever could. But as the days turned into weeks, strange things began to happen behind the scenes. ABC executives received calls from high-profile figures asking whether Meghan could be given another chance. Anonymous emails started circulating, hinting that Meghan was considering legal action over defamation. And Whoopi, she remained unfazed, carrying on as if the entire storm hadn't touched her. Yet, little did anyone know, something bigger was brewing. Something that would not only reignite the feud between Meghan and Whoopi, but also expose the hidden negotiations, the off-camera recordings, and the one private exchange that changed everything. Because what Meghan said after the cameras stopped rolling, when she thought no one else could hear, would come back to haunt her in a way no one could have imagined. And that's where our story truly begins. Because what was meant to be a morning talk show appearance turned into the spark of a media war, one that would drag reputations, alliances, and untold truths into the light. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The days leading up to Meghan Markle's fateful appearance on The View were nothing short of cinematic, the kind of tension that hangs in the air before a thunderstorm. Everyone in the entertainment world could sense something was coming. Meghan had been unusually quiet, her team unusually loud. There were leaks, whispers, and cryptic posts that hinted at a major television breakthrough. It was as if she was preparing not just for an interview, but for a resurrection. Her team called it a reintroduction. To Meghan, this was her chance to rewrite the narrative, to take back control from the tabloids, the royals, and the critics who painted her as manipulative and entitled. But those closest to her, even her publicist, knew this wasn't going to be easy. Because stepping into Whoopi Goldberg's world meant stepping into a lion's den. The View wasn't just a talk show. It was an institution. It had seen politicians melt, celebrities stumble, and cultural icons break into tears under the glare of honest conversation. For decades, it thrived on chaos. Unpredictable, raw, unfiltered chaos. And that's exactly what Meghan had spent years trying to avoid. Yet here she was, voluntarily walking into it. According to one insider, Meghan's decision to join The View as a guest wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. Her podcast deal had quietly fallen apart. Netflix had mutually paused several of her proposed projects. Her image, once wrapped in royal glamour, was cracking. She needed a new outlet. Something live. Something unedited. Something that screamed, "I'm still relevant." But there was one big problem: Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi had been with The View for over a decade. She was the show's heartbeat, its compass. The kind of host who could make or break a guest's image with one raised eyebrow. Meghan knew this. She'd studied Whoopi's interviews, her cadence, her subtle smirks when she disagreed. Meghan wasn't walking in blind. She was walking in calculated. Still, no amount of calculation could prepare her for the human element. During the planning meetings, ABC producers discussed Meghan's segment at length. Should they go soft? Ask her about motherhood, activism, her projects? Or should they go deeper? The royal rift, the Oprah interview, the contradictions? Ultimately, Whoopi made the call. If she wants to sit at this table, she sits in the hot seat like everyone else. That one statement set the tone. From the moment Meghan's team learned of it, the relationship between her camp and The View's staff grew icy. Meghan's representatives began sending topic outlines and off-limit subjects to producers, something rarely tolerated in the show's format. Whoopi caught wind of it and, in a meeting, reportedly said, if she's scared of questions, she shouldn't come. But Meghan came anyway, and not quietly. Days before the appearance, paparazzi caught her exiting her Montecito mansion wearing a pristine white power suit, the same shade she would later wear on the show. Her confident stride and faint smile ignited headlines. Meghan's big return to live television. Every major outlet speculated what she might say. Was she about to announce a new project? A book? A partnership with ABC? The rumor mill spun wild. Behind the scenes, though, Meghan was restless. She rehearsed her talking points relentlessly. Her team held mock interviews, simulating Whoopi's tough tone. Yet, something always broke her composure. They'll respect me, she reportedly told a close friend. They have to. I'm not the villain they think I am. But that was precisely the problem. Meghan wasn't coming to The View to converse. She was coming to convert. To transform public opinion with her charm and rehearsed empathy. Only she forgot one thing. Authenticity can't be scripted. On the morning of the live broadcast, the ABC studio in New York buzzed with electric tension. Crew members whispered that security had been increased. Meghan's handlers hovered nervously near her dressing room door. Meanwhile, Whoopi sat in her corner chair, sipping coffee, watching it all unfold. When asked by a stagehand if she was nervous, Whoopi chuckled. Nervous? Nah, I've just seen this movie before. She wasn't wrong. Over her career, Whoopi had watched countless ambitious figures crash and burn, trying to manipulate the very medium that gave them fame. To her, Meghan wasn't unique, just the latest in a long line of celebrities trying to control chaos. The call time neared. Producers counted down. The audience filed in, buzzing with excitement. Some were there just to see Meghan in person. Others came for Whoopi's reaction. Everyone, whether they admitted it or not, came for the tension. And then, something strange happened. Just before going live, Meghan reportedly walked up to Whoopi backstage. Her tone was polite but clipped. I just want this to be a positive conversation, she said. Whoopi looked at her, calm, collected, and replied, positive is good. Honest is better. That line set the stage. When the cameras turned on, the studio lights flooded the table, and Meghan's smile locked in place. But it was a fragile smile, the kind that hides fear behind control. The first few minutes were harmless. Introductions, small talk, laughter. Meghan praised the show for empowering women through dialogue. Whoopi nodded but said little. Then came the question that tipped the balance. Sunny Hostin, as scripted, asked Meghan, what drew you to come back into such a public space after choosing to step away from the royal spotlight? It was a fair question, neutral, even kind. But Meghan froze for half a second before answering. She smiled, tilting her head slightly. I think it's important for women to reclaim their voices, she said. When people try to silence you, sometimes the best response is to speak louder. The audience clapped, but Whoopi's expression didn't change. She leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing with quiet curiosity. But don't you think, she asked, that sometimes speaking louder isn't the same as being heard? A hush fell. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Meghan laughed softly, trying to deflect. Well, I think people have to keep telling their truth. Sure, Whoopi replied. But whose truth are we talking about? Yours or the version you sell? It was like a pin dropping in a cathedral. The audience gasped audibly. Meghan blinked, unsure whether to laugh or confront it head-on. Every instinct told her to keep her composure. Every nerve told her to fight back. She chose the middle, an uneasy smile. I don't think anyone sells the truth. I think we share experiences. Uh-huh, Whoopi said softly, a tone that carried the weight of experience. Sharing is good. But sometimes people confuse storytelling with sincerity. The tension was palpable. The other hosts shifted in their seats. Producers in the control room whispered frantically into headsets. But Whoopi didn't flinch. She'd seen too much, said too much, lived too much to be intimidated by image management. And Meghan, used to polite applause and soft questions, was out of her depth. What's fascinating is what viewers didn't see. According to an audience member seated in the third row, Meghan's posture stiffened completely after that exchange. Her hands clenched beneath the table. Her eyes darted toward the cameras, then to Whoopi, as if silently asking, Are you doing this on purpose? The answer was yes. Whoopi wasn't trying to humiliate Meghan, at least not personally. She was trying to expose the facade, the PR sheen that had clouded Meghan's public persona for years. To Whoopi, honesty wasn't cruelty. It was cleansing. But Meghan didn't see it that way. During the commercial break, witnesses reported Meghan turning to a producer and whispering harshly, This wasn't supposed to go like this. The producer could only shrug. Once you go live, you can't edit authenticity. By the second half of the show, the tension had evolved into something magnetic. The conversation turned toward women in media, and Meghan tried to steer it back to safe territory, empowerment, inspiration, personal growth. But every time she tried to script the tone, Whoopi steered it back toward reality. Empowerment, Whoopi said, isn't about being liked. It's about being real. You can't inspire people with a mask on. The crowd erupted again, and that's when it hit Meghan. She wasn't in control anymore. Her composure cracked, just slightly, enough for the cameras to catch it. Her smile faltered. Her eyes dropped. For a moment, she looked not like a duchess or a media mogul, but a woman realizing she'd walked into the wrong room. Still, she didn't back down. Meghan straightened in her chair and said, Well, I think authenticity looks different for everyone. Whoopi nodded. Exactly. Which is why it can't be managed. Boom. Another mic drop. By the time the credits rolled, the audience was electric. The internet was already alive with reactions. Clips, memes, hashtags, all dissecting every word, every glance, every raised eyebrow. Meghan had come to restore her image. Instead, she became the story again, not as a visionary, but as a cautionary tale. As the cameras cut and applause faded, Meghan turned sharply, thanked the hosts, and exited the stage faster than anyone expected. Crew members avoided eye contact. One insider described the moment as tense enough to slice with a knife. Whoopi, ever composed, remained seated. She adjusted her glasses, exhaled, and said to the floor manager, "She'll be fine. Or she won't. That's her choice." Outside the studio, Meghan's car was already waiting. She got in without speaking to the press. Her aides followed close behind, whispering about damage control and statements. Inside the car, Meghan reportedly sat in silence for several minutes before finally saying, "They weren't ready for me." But deep down, even she knew that wasn't true. They were ready. She wasn't. And as the headlines began pouring in, Whoopi shuts down Meghan on live TV, Meghan Markle's media meltdown, The View turns into The Duel, the reality hit hard. She had tried to control the story again, and once again, it slipped out of her hands. Yet, in the days that followed, something unexpected would happen. A private recording from backstage would surface. A recording that revealed exactly what Meghan said moments before walking out. And when the world heard those words, the story took an even darker twist. Because Meghan's final sentence backstage wasn't defensive or wounded. It was chillingly confident. She said, "They'll regret underestimating me." But what came next would prove that the only person who underestimated anything that day was Meghan herself. And the storm was only beginning to brew. The next morning, the media didn't just report the story, it devoured it. Every morning show replayed the clip of Whoopi Goldberg saying, "Maybe it's time to step down." Every frame, every pause, every flicker of Meghan's expression was dissected like evidence in a trial. Pundits argued over who was right. Social media split into camps, and by noon, the hashtags #Whoopi versus Meghan and #StepDownGate were trending in over a dozen countries. For Meghan Markle, it wasn't just a PR setback, it was a public reckoning. She had hoped her appearance would rebrand her as the voice of modern empowerment, but instead, it became a symbol of tone-deaf overreach. And yet, if you thought Meghan was done, you'd be wrong. Because behind those tightly drawn curtains of Montecito, a plan was already taking shape, one that would backfire spectacularly. But before that plan even left the ground, something else happened. Something she never saw coming. Late that evening, a junior producer from The View received a message, an anonymous tip containing a short audio file. The file was labeled Backstage, Uncut. It wasn't long before it spread through private journalist channels, and within hours, a few select editors in New York and London had heard it. The content was explosive. The clip was brief, just under 2 minutes, but what it contained would reignite the controversy with volcanic force. In it, Meghan's voice was unmistakable, calm, controlled, almost chilling. You could hear the muffled sound of a makeup artist packing brushes in the background as Meghan said, "They think they can rattle me? Let's see who's still standing when I have my own show." There was a pause, followed by the quiet voice of an assistant. "You mean your own talk show?" Meghan laughed softly. "Not just a talk show. A replacement." Those last 2 words, a replacement, set the internet on fire. By dawn, gossip sites, podcasts, and YouTube commentators were spinning theories like wildfire. What did she mean by replacement? Was she referring to Whoopi Goldberg? To The View itself? Or to something even bigger? Her alleged plan to create her own network platform? ABC executives were furious. The recording wasn't part of the official studio archives, which meant someone on the inside had leaked it. The network's legal department launched an immediate internal investigation. But as they tried to plug the leak, the damage kept spreading. Whoopi, meanwhile, was informed of the leak before the rest of the hosts. Her response was simple. "So she's doubling down?" Then, according to a crew member, Whoopi leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Well, I guess the show's not over." But for Meghan, it was never just about Whoopi. It was about power. Reclaiming it, reshaping it, and refusing to be sidelined. That's why, only hours after the leak went viral, her spokesperson issued a carefully worded statement. The Duchess was unaware of any backstage recordings being made. Her comments have been taken out of context, and she maintains deep respect for Ms. Goldberg and the legacy of The View. But respect wasn't what people were hearing in that recording. They heard ambition, contempt, entitlement. It was the same tone critics had accused her of since the royal exit. And now, the proof was right there, in her own voice. Public opinion swung brutally. Major entertainment outlets called it Meghan's worst PR disaster since Montecito. The Daily Mail ran the headline, "Step down? No. Take over. Meghan's secret plot exposed." Talk shows debated her sincerity. Former staff members spoke out about pattern behavior, and one British columnist wrote, "Meghan keeps mistaking attention for authority." But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from Whoopi herself. During the next day's episode, producers expected her to either avoid the subject or give a polished statement. Instead, she walked onto the stage with the same calm authority that made her a legend, sat down, and addressed the elephant in the room head-on. "So," she began. Apparently someone recorded backstage. "That's wrong. But if you're going to record something, make sure you're proud of what you said. I've said plenty of things that got me in trouble. But I've never said anything I wouldn't stand by." The audience clapped thunderously. Whoopi continued, "This show's been around for a long time, and I've seen people come and go. But if you think you're going to replace me, good luck. Because I don't do this for fame. I do it for truth." It was an indirect response, but the meaning was crystal clear. Meghan's team was livid. Her PR manager reportedly called ABC executives demanding they rein in Whoopi to avoid further escalation. ABC's response was short: "We don't censor honesty." At that moment, the feud stopped being just a public spat. It became a cultural flashpoint. For the next week, every entertainment outlet treated it like a Cold War. Meghan's defenders accused Whoopi of gatekeeping the media space and silencing new voices. Whoopi's supporters called Meghan arrogant and unprepared for accountability. Hashtags like #TeamWhoopi and #TeamMeghan turned into full-blown digital battlegrounds. But the story took a darker twist when the source of the leak was finally discovered. It wasn't an employee. It wasn't a hacker. It was an audience member. A young woman named Marissa, a freelance blogger who had attended the live taping, had captured the audio accidentally while recording a behind-the-scenes vlog for her small YouTube channel. After realizing what she had, she tried selling it to a tabloid, who rejected it out of fear of legal issues. So she leaked it anonymously online. When her identity was eventually revealed, Meghan's lawyers threatened legal action. But by then, it didn't matter. The world had already moved past the legalities. What mattered was the narrative, and the narrative painted Meghan as a schemer caught in her own ambition. For Whoopi, it was vindication. For Meghan, humiliation. But here's where the story twists again. 3 days after the leak, Meghan was spotted having dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel with a man known only as JP in media circles, a top producer rumored to be developing a new talk show concept for a streaming giant. The timing was suspicious. Photos surfaced online of Meghan laughing at the table, her phone placed face down, her posture relaxed. Headlines read, "Meghan plots her revenge show." Speculation soared that she was, in fact, planning a rival production, her own version of The View. Some insiders even claimed she had pitched it months earlier under the working title Perspective. The premise? A panel of modern women discussing global and cultural issues without judgment or hierarchy. It sounded noble, until you realized what "without hierarchy" really meant. No Whoopi Goldberg. When Whoopi was asked about the rumored rival show, she smiled faintly and said, "Let her. The world's big enough for both of us. But she might learn it's not as easy as it looks." That single comment, delivered with Whoopi's signature calm, became the quote of the week. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was the voice of someone who had seen fame chew people up and spit them out. But Meghan took it personally. According to a source close to her circle, Meghan told friends she was done playing nice. She wanted to reclaim her power and show the world she could outshine anyone, even Whoopi Goldberg. Her confidence, though admirable, blinded her to the one truth Hollywood veterans live by. Reputation is everything, and once you lose credibility, the climb back up is steep and lonely. Within a week, Meghan's camp announced she would be launching a digital series focusing on female empowerment and real conversations. The announcement was vague but clearly a response to Whoopi's dominance. Critics immediately labeled it reactionary, while fans praised her resilience. But then came another blow. ABC released an official statement confirming they would not be inviting Meghan back as a guest. The statement read, "We appreciate Ms. Markle's participation on The View, but have no current plans for further appearances." Translation, don't come back. That quiet rejection hurt more than any headline. To Meghan, it wasn't just about losing a seat at a table. It was about losing credibility. The world had seen her as a duchess, an activist, an actress. Now, they saw her as something else, unpredictable. Behind the scenes, Meghan's advisors urged her to move on, to focus on her charity work and rebrand later. But she couldn't. The confrontation with Whoopi had struck deeper than anyone realized. It wasn't just humiliation. It was identity. Whoopi had called out the one thing Meghan feared most, inauthenticity. And that accusation cut to the bone. Because whether fair or not, Meghan had spent years trying to prove she wasn't a construct, that her compassion was real, her advocacy sincere. Yet, now, one woman's calm honesty had undone all of it in minutes. Still, Meghan wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. A week after ABC's statement, Meghan appeared at a women's leadership gala in Los Angeles. She delivered a speech about resilience in the face of scrutiny. Her words were polished, but her tone was sharp, almost defiant. Observers noted that she seemed tense, guarded, as if performing strength rather than living it. Midway through the speech, she said something that reignited every headline. Sometimes, the women who challenge the old guard are labeled difficult. But maybe it's the old guard that needs to evolve. It was a veiled jab, everyone knew it. And though she didn't name Whoopi, she didn't have to. By the next morning, the clip was viral. And while Meghan's loyalists praised her bravery, most viewers saw something else, a woman still fighting a battle she'd already lost. But what Meghan didn't realize was that another battle was brewing behind closed doors, one that would make the TV confrontation look like child's play. Because within ABC's headquarters, a confidential report was being compiled, detailing the internal fallout, the recording investigation, and a shocking revelation about who had first tipped off the media about Meghan's appearance in the first place. And when that report leaked, it wouldn't just shake Meghan's team. It would drag someone from her own inner circle into the fire. Someone she trusted. Someone she never suspected. And that betrayal would ignite a war far beyond daytime television. Because as Meghan soon discovered, not every microphone is on a table. Some are hidden much closer. And this time, she wouldn't see it coming. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the tension in the studio lingered like smoke from a fire that refused to die. Backstage, the crew whispered among themselves, still processing what had just happened on live television. Some of the assistants had never seen anything like it. A guest of Meghan Markle's stature being put in her place, not with aggression, but with calm, piercing honesty. That was Whoopi Goldberg's specialty. She didn't need to raise her voice or make a scene. One perfectly chosen sentence, delivered with precision, could dismantle an entire performance. And that's exactly what she did. For Meghan, the experience was more than just humiliating. It was a wake-up call. She had believed that stepping into The View would mark a new chapter, a reclaiming of her narrative and her public image. She expected applause, admiration, even deference. Instead, she faced scrutiny, challenge, and judgment, all live in front of millions. And as the adrenaline faded, reality set in. She wasn't just up against a show. She was up against the truth. But truth has a funny way of hiding behind layers. While the cameras captured only snippets of the confrontation, the real drama was unfolding off camera. And that drama, as always, involved people Meghan trusted, people she never suspected could betray her. According to insiders, backstage tension had started long before the live taping. Meghan's aides were on high alert, micromanaging every aspect of her appearance, from the way she walked to the hand gestures she would use. They attempted to control the room, to control the narrative, to control even the atmosphere itself. But the View staff were professionals, used to high-maintenance guests who thought they could orchestrate every moment. They saw through the polished exterior. One key moment had occurred during a brief pre-show rehearsal. Meghan was standing with her team near the production table when Whoopi walked in. She didn't approach Meghan directly. Instead, she leaned over the table, addressing the crew, and made a seemingly offhand comment. If she wants to sit here, she better be ready for questions she can't script. The comment, though innocuous on the surface, carried an unmistakable warning. Someone from Meghan's team overheard it and reported it immediately to Meghan, sparking tension that carried all the way to the live taping. Then came the infamous backstage recording. While the live segment was controlled by producers and broadcast cameras, one of the audience members, as we learned in the previous chapter, had recorded Meghan's comments without permission. The unedited, unfiltered audio captured Meghan speaking candidly to her assistant, revealing intentions that the polished live segment had concealed. It was, in many ways, worse than the confrontation on air. Not only was Meghan caught off guard, but her own words betrayed her ambition and her strategy. What no one expected, however, was the internal fallout within Meghan's own team. The leak revealed a surprising fracture. One of her closest aides, someone she relied on for counsel and protection, had failed to secure sensitive information properly. According to reports, this aide had been distracted during the live taping, allowing Meghan's remarks to be recorded. While unintentional, the breach would have devastating consequences. Within hours of the recording surfacing, journalists were contacting ABC for confirmation. Her PR team was scrambling to contain the damage, and Whoopi, now fully aware of the leak, maintained her composure with the serenity of a veteran navigating a storm. Every move was calculated, every response measured. She understood that in entertainment, perception was power, and Meghan's own words had given her a powerful edge. Meanwhile, Meghan's team worked frantically. Statements were drafted, emails were sent to media outlets, and lawyers were consulted. Every effort was made to frame the leak as a misrepresentation, as an isolated incident, as a misunderstanding. But the truth was harder to manipulate. The audio spoke for itself. Every word, every laugh, every pause painted a picture of a woman with ambitious plans, unafraid to challenge established authority. It was during this period that one of the more subtle but crucial dynamics came into play, the relationship between Meghan and ABC's producers. She had entered the studio under the assumption that they would protect her image, or at least offer some degree of control over the narrative. What she hadn't anticipated was that the producers valued integrity and authenticity above all else. They saw through the carefully curated persona and were not afraid to allow the truth to unfold. As one producer later described, "We don't manage truth, we broadcast it." That philosophy had ensured that the live segment was raw and real, capturing the tension, the unease, and the subtle cracks in Meghan's composure. And because it was live, there was no way to edit or retract it. The world watched in real time, witnessing what Meghan had always feared: exposure. But the backstage drama wasn't limited to leaks and internal fractures. Sources reported that tensions escalated between Meghan's team members themselves. Some aides began questioning each other's loyalty, arguing over strategy, and debating whether the live segment should have been approached differently. The environment, described by insiders as toxic, was compounded by Meghan's own stress and frustration. She reportedly felt betrayed, both by the system she had trusted and by her own aides, who she believed had failed to protect her image. And then there was Whoopi. Off camera, she continued to operate with her usual authority, observing every movement, every expression. Some crew members noted that she was almost surgical in her approach. No overt aggression, no visible gloating, just a calm, precise dismantling of narrative pretense. She understood that humiliation didn't have to be loud to be effective. It could be quiet, measured, and unavoidable. By the evening following the taping, the consequences of the backstage revelations began to compound. ABC executives convened emergency meetings, reviewing security protocols, internal communication, and audience access. The leak had exposed not just Meghan's candid moments, but also vulnerabilities in the production environment itself. Questions were asked: who had access to microphones? Who had control over recording equipment? How had the audio gone from private backstage chatter to a viral sensation in hours? And while ABC worked to investigate, Meghan's public image continued to deteriorate. Social media amplified the audio, memes were created, and commentators dissected every phrase. What was initially a single tense moment between two women on a talk show had now transformed into a full-blown media narrative, one in which Meghan was portrayed as manipulative, overly ambitious, and out of her depth. Yet, through all of this, Meghan herself remained determined. Despite the mounting pressure, she continued to assert her narrative, that she was misunderstood, misrepresented, and unfairly targeted. She held meetings with her team, strategizing for damage control, planning appearances, and even considering legal avenues to prevent further dissemination of the audio. But with every passing hour, the narrative solidified against her. The leak had become the story, and she was now reacting rather than controlling. Meanwhile, Whoopi, fully aware of the storm, chose not to escalate further publicly. Her approach was deliberate. Allow Meghan to make her own mistakes, let the media amplify the narrative, and maintain her own composure. She understood that true power in these situations wasn't about retaliation. It was about observation and restraint. And this is where the story becomes even more complex. Because backstage, beyond the microphones, beyond the recording, and beyond the cameras, a series of private interactions occurred. Conversations between Meghan, her aides, and a select group of journalists that would ultimately change the course of her public image. These conversations, recorded separately and leaked in bits and pieces, hinted at ambitions far beyond what had been revealed on air. Meghan wasn't merely reacting to public perception, she was plotting a strategic media takeover. But ambition alone is not enough. In an environment like daytime television, missteps are magnified. Allies can turn into adversaries overnight. Trust is fragile, and miscalculations are unforgiving. And Meghan, for all her experience navigating public scrutiny as a member of the royal family, was learning, perhaps too late, that the rules of live television were different. By the end of the week, the cumulative effect of the backstage leaks, internal discord, and viral media coverage had created an environment that Meghan could neither control nor easily exit. Every move she made was scrutinized, every comment analyzed, and every intention questioned. And in this climate, a new player emerged, someone within her inner circle whose loyalty was, unbeknownst to Meghan, already compromised. This individual, a confidant who had been with Meghan through numerous public appearances, held information that would escalate the situation even further. Details that, if revealed, could damage not only Meghan's public persona, but also the credibility of her media ventures. It was a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to explode. And as Meghan prepared for her next public appearance, the storm she had sought to command was now commanding her. Every strategy, every talking point, every carefully crafted image was at risk. And while the cameras would capture her smile and her composure, the backstage reality was one of tension, mistrust, and impending betrayal. Because in the world of high-stakes media, the person you trust most can become the one who changes everything. And Meghan would soon learn just how true that was. But the revelation of that betrayal, when it finally surfaced, would shock even those who had been following every twist of this unfolding drama. Because sometimes, the greatest threats aren't the ones you see on camera, they're the ones you never even suspect. And Meghan Markle was about to discover that the backstage world of The View held secrets far more dangerous than the spotlight itself. No one expects betrayal from the people closest to them. It's a truth as old as power itself. The higher you rise, the sharper the knives, and the closer the betrayals hide. For Meghan Markle, the revelation came quietly at first, almost imperceptibly. The aides and consultants who had once been her shield began to fracture under pressure, and the fracture that would shatter everything originated from a single, unassuming individual. Her senior communications manager, a woman known only to insiders as CJ. CJ had been with Meghan for nearly 3 years, navigating the treacherous waters of media appearances, social media controversies, and the constant, unrelenting public scrutiny. She was someone Meghan trusted implicitly, the kind of aide who anticipated every possible crisis before it happened. But even trust has limits, and the intense environment of live television, combined with the explosive nature of the View taping, began to erode her loyalty. The tipping point, sources revealed, occurred in the chaos immediately following Meghan's confrontation with Whoopi Goldberg. CJ had spent hours backstage managing logistics, adjusting microphones, coordinating with production staff, and ensuring that Meghan's every move was controlled and polished. She witnessed firsthand the unfiltered reactions of the audience, the subtle but cutting remarks from Whoopi, and Meghan's own rare cracks in composure. The pressure was immense. And in that pressure, CJ began to question not Meghan's intentions, but the feasibility of her ambition. She wasn't ready, CJ confided to a friend, who later leaked the information. Not for this audience, not for this medium. She thought charisma could replace experience, and it couldn't. That sentiment, though private at first, planted the seeds of a chain reaction. By the next day, CJ began sharing off-the-record insights with select media contacts. Just small tidbits, nothing that could immediately harm Meghan. A comment here about a mismanaged cue, a note there about Meghan's nervous gestures, seemingly minor observations. But as anyone familiar with media strategy knows, minor observations can be magnified into a narrative bomb. By the time the leaked backstage audio went viral, CJ's role became pivotal. Insiders report that she was one of the first to confirm the authenticity of the recording, providing context for journalists and further fueling speculation about Meghan's intentions. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it set the stage for public perception to pivot from curiosity to judgment. What made this betrayal so profound wasn't just the leak. It was the motivation. According to several sources, CJ had begun to feel that Meghan's ambitions were becoming reckless. The live confrontation, combined with the subsequent viral backlash, convinced her that Meghan was putting not only herself, but everyone around her at risk. She was spiraling, CJ reportedly told an insider. She didn't understand that live TV doesn't forgive, and I couldn't keep managing the fallout like this anymore. But CJ's disillusionment wasn't merely professional. There was an emotional element at play. In private, she admitted to feeling overshadowed by Meghan's relentless confidence, frustrated by the constant pressure to polish, curate, and mediate. Over time, that frustration transformed into a quiet, calculated decision to shift allegiances, not publicly, not overtly, but in ways that would strategically expose Meghan without appearing malicious. The first significant act of this betrayal came during a post-taping debrief. Meghan's team gathered in a small conference room, reviewing footage and analyzing social media reactions. CJ subtly introduced a narrative that the viral clip was more revealing than it appeared, that Meghan's comments backstage had hinted at ambitious projects, and that the public would interpret these statements as aggressive and controlling. No one objected at first, but as the narrative began to crystallize, journalists began to pick up the story, framing Meghan's actions not as candid honesty, but as arrogance. Headlines emerged that painted her as manipulative, self-serving, and disconnected from reality. Meghan plans her own media takeover, read one headline. Duchess caught strategizing beyond the View, read another. And all of it traced back, in part, to the subtle leaks and interpretations fed by CJ. Meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg remained a silent observer, her reputation untarnished and her authority intact. The contrast between her poised control and Meghan's unraveling image was striking. It was almost poetic, and it didn't escape the public's eye. Social media amplified the narrative. Memes, commentary, and analysis dissected every gesture, every pause, every tone. And in the midst of this, CJ continued her quiet, methodical work, providing context and insights to journalists that ensured the story maintained a steady, devastating momentum. But betrayal is rarely a singular act. CJ's next move would escalate the situation beyond what anyone expected. Sources reveal that she leaked a series of behind-the-scenes photographs from the studio. Candid shots showing Meghan in moments of apparent frustration, her expressions captured when she believed no one was looking. The images, innocuous on their own, were paired with subtle commentary that suggested strategic intent. Meghan, according to CJ's framing, wasn't just a guest. She was positioning herself as a potential replacement for the show. The reaction was instantaneous. Media outlets ran with the photos, often speculating wildly about Meghan's ambitions. Twitter users debated, analyzed, and dissected every frame. Headlines painted a picture of a calculated, ambitious figure navigating a complex media battlefield, a narrative very different from the polished, controlled persona Meghan had hoped to present. The most shocking revelation, however, was not in the public exposure, but in the private confrontation that followed. Sources indicate that Meghan, upon learning of the leaks, confronted CJ directly in her Montecito home. According to witnesses, The discussion was tense, heated, and deeply personal. Meghan reportedly demanded an explanation, accusing CJ of betrayal. CJ remained calm, offering a rationale that stunned Meghan. "I did what I thought was necessary," she said. "You're talented, yes, but your ambition is reckless. You're not ready for this stage, and I won't be complicit in a public disaster that could have been avoided." For Meghan, the words were like a dagger. Not only had her team failed to protect her, but one of her most trusted aides had consciously taken steps to undermine her narrative, a strategic betrayal dressed up as concern. And yet, CJ's actions weren't purely malicious. There was a calculated logic to her choices. She understood the dynamics of live television, the power of perception, and the volatility of public opinion. Her goal wasn't personal vengeance. It was damage mitigation, a belief, however misguided, that exposing Meghan's vulnerabilities early might protect her from an even greater fall. But in truth, the effect was catastrophic. The combination of the viral audio, the backstage photographs, and the subtle context provided by CJ created a perfect storm. Meghan's reputation suffered not just on The View, but across every platform where public discourse occurred. Social media commentators, journalists, and even casual viewers began to question her authenticity, her motives, and her readiness for media stardom. And this was only the beginning, because CJ's insider knowledge didn't stop at leaks and context. According to anonymous sources, she had also begun quietly gathering information on Meghan's planned media ventures, her proposed digital series, and her outreach to potential collaborators. This information would later surface in unexpected ways, complicating Meghan's attempts to recover her image and giving rival media entities ammunition to challenge her credibility. The stakes, already high, were now unprecedented. A trusted aide had become the lever that could tip the balance of public perception, strategically releasing information that simultaneously revealed ambition, exposed vulnerability, and amplified public scrutiny. And Meghan? She was still reeling, not only from the confrontation with Whoopi, but now from the realization that the battle wasn't just external. It was internal. The betrayal by someone so close forced Meghan to confront a harsh truth. In the world of media and power, loyalty is conditional, trust is fragile, and the people who stand closest can sometimes be the ones who inflict the deepest wounds. And the most dangerous part? Meghan didn't know the full extent of what CJ had already shared, nor did she understand the strategic consequences that would unfold in the days and weeks to come. Because backstage secrets, once revealed, rarely remain contained. And as the next chapter of this saga would show, the insider who had turned wasn't done influencing the narrative. Her next move would set the stage for an escalation that no one, not Meghan, not Whoopi, and not the audience, could have anticipated. The stage was set, and the real war was only just beginning. The morning after the broadcast, Meghan Markle woke to a digital storm unlike anything she had ever experienced. Notifications flooded her phone, Twitter alerts, Instagram mentions, Facebook tags, YouTube comments, and news alerts from outlets around the globe. Every platform carried the same message, in varying shades of drama. Meghan had been humiliated on live television. Whoopi Goldberg had publicly challenged her. And now, millions of eyes were dissecting every word, every movement, every micro-expression she had displayed. It began slowly at first, a trickle of online commentary, a few clips shared by early risers. Then it became a torrent. Hashtags like #StepDownMeghan, #WhoopiKnowsBest, and #DuchessDrama were trending internationally. Memes, reaction videos, and satirical posts multiplied by the hour. Some accounts were merciless, others analytical, and a few supportive, but the overall tone was unmistakably skeptical. The internet had made its verdict, and for Meghan, it was brutal. Her PR team scrambled immediately. They attempted damage control by issuing statements emphasizing that Meghan had been misunderstood, that Whoopi's comments were misinterpreted, and that backstage recordings were taken out of context. But in the age of social media virality, context is often irrelevant. Once a clip is shared, once a phrase is captioned and memed, it takes on a life of its own, independent of the person who said it. Meanwhile, traditional media amplified the chaos. Headlines screamed across websites. Meghan Markle humiliated on live TV. Whoopi Goldberg schools the Duchess. Step down or step aside. Meghan's public setback. Journalists dissected every frame of the broadcast. Panels on news channels debated the confrontation, replaying the clip over and over while speculating on Meghan's intentions. The narrative was clear. Meghan had entered a space she didn't understand, and her carefully curated public image had faltered under scrutiny. The effect on Meghan was immediate. According to insiders, she spent hours scrolling through social media feeds, watching, reading, and absorbing the backlash. For someone who had built her life around public perception, this kind of instantaneous, global judgment was suffocating. She was accustomed to strategic messaging, controlled narratives, and curated interviews. Social media, however, didn't allow for nuance, only rapid-fire reactions. Every post, every comment, every viral clip became a verdict, and Meghan's public image teetered dangerously. Observers noticed a subtle shift in her online persona. Her previously polished Instagram feed became sparse. Comments were disabled on some posts. Public appearances were delayed or canceled, reportedly because she was reevaluating how to approach media interactions after the fallout. It was a calculated retreat, but one that carried its own consequences. In the court of public opinion, silence can often speak louder than words, and many interpreted her absence as a tacit admission of failure. But social media didn't stop with criticism. It also became a battleground of speculation and conspiracy. Fans and critics alike began theorizing about the backstage dynamics, CJ's role in the leak, and Meghan's intentions for future media projects. Threads appeared detailing the possible revenge strategy Meghan might be plotting, including the rumored digital series she had discussed in private meetings. Every rumor, regardless of its truth, was amplified, dissected, and debated. In a matter of hours, Meghan was not just a guest on a talk show. She had become a cultural phenomenon, defined by conflict, ambition, and perceived overreach. This virality wasn't just limited to the public. Media insiders and industry professionals weighed in, offering commentary on Meghan's approach. Some defended her, arguing that she had been courageous to step into a live, opinionated environment. Others criticized her for underestimating the experience and instinct of a veteran like Whoopi Goldberg. The consensus, however, leaned toward skepticism. Meghan had misjudged the situation, and the consequences were visible for all to see. Compounding the chaos was the role of memes and satirical videos. Within hours, clips of Meghan's gestures, expressions, and reactions were remixed, captioned, and shared across TikTok and YouTube. Some were humorous, others biting. One particularly viral video juxtaposed Meghan's on-screen composure with a background of dramatic orchestral music, emphasizing the tension of the moment. These viral pieces extended the reach of the incident far beyond traditional media, reaching audiences who may never have watched The View but now had a vivid, highly entertaining impression of Meghan's confrontation. This digital amplification had a psychological impact on Meghan. Insiders report that she felt trapped in a feedback loop. Every scroll and every notification reinforced the narrative of public embarrassment. Her aides worked tirelessly to shield her, but social media operates beyond containment. Once something goes viral, it is impossible to fully control. Every attempt at clarification or explanation risked further misinterpretation or backlash. Amid this chaos, a deeper strategy emerged. Meghan's team, recognizing the power of virality, began attempting to reframe the narrative. Carefully curated posts, selective interviews, and controlled leaks were used to suggest that Meghan was misunderstood, strategic, and poised for a comeback. Yet, the window for controlling the story was narrow. In a world where reactions happen in seconds and trends shift hourly, even a carefully crafted counternarrative risks being drowned out by the noise of social commentary. Adding to the complexity was the role of Whoopi Goldberg in this digital ecosystem. Her measured, authoritative presence became a stabilizing force on social media, in stark contrast to the fluctuating perceptions of Meghan. Clips of her calm rebuttals and insightful commentary were shared widely, with captions emphasizing her experience, her authority, and her unwavering poise. In the court of public perception, Whoopi was solidifying her credibility while Meghan's was destabilizing. Social media also became a tool of investigation and exposure. Journalists and bloggers began tracing CJ's involvement, speculating on her motivations, and the timing of leaks. Conspiracy theories flourished. Was the backstage recording orchestrated? Was it accidental? Was it part of a broader plan to undermine Meghan? The intrigue captivated audiences, keeping them engaged for hours, days, even weeks. Each new revelation, each rumor, each insider tip kept the story alive and maintained a high level of public attention. Meanwhile, Meghan faced another challenge: the relentless commentary on her character. Social media users and commentators dissected her expressions, her tone, and her posture, interpreting them as signs of arrogance, insecurity, or calculation. Every action was a potential headline. Every pause was analyzed, and every attempt to clarify or explain was met with further skepticism. In effect, Meghan had become a living narrative, a character in a story controlled by public perception, viral media, and the powerful presence of her counterpart, Whoopi Goldberg. The psychological toll of this social media storm was profound. Sources close to Meghan report that she became increasingly isolated, relying heavily on her inner circle while limiting outside interactions.